Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwain McFarland.
Memorial Day is in the rearview mirror, folks. It's fantasy football season, and it's time to hustle. What's up, everybody? Welcome in. Brian Drake, Dwain McFarland. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Where else would you rather be getting ready for fantasy football season 2021? Dwain, how are you, my friend?
Man, I'm good. I can't believe that it's actually June. I think the Cowboys play in the first game, right, against the Steelers in the preseason. And I think we're less than how many weeks away from that? We're getting really close because that's in early August. So
we're 100 days from the season opener right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. We're at that point in the season where time just starts to fly.
And I know, guys, time's going to fly by, and all of a sudden you're going to say, oh my God, what do I do? I've got a draft this weekend. Relax. We got you here at the Hustle. We can save you some cash this year. If you want to save 25% off any PFF subscription, just use our code. It's HUSTLE at pff.com. Go through there. Check out Dwain's utilization report. Check out all the draft tiers. Check out the grades, the data. All season long, you get access to it. 25% off. Very simple. Just use our code HUSTLE. Tell them Dwain sent you. Don't tell them I sent you. They don't really like me over there that much yet. They don't know who I am. But anyways, use that. Get some money off. It's going to be a great time. And we're going to have a great show tonight because we're talking wrestling. We're talking golf. We're talking beer. We'll mix in a little fantasy. It is going to be a great show. And it's because we brought in John Daigle of NBC Sports Edge. What's going on, John? Welcome back. You were just here, it seems like 10 minutes ago with our best ball draft. How are you?
I saw you mention golf in the promotion tweet. I didn't know what you wanted to talk about golf, but of course, if you throw it out there, I will gladly talk about it.
Well, you play a little bit, and you've had a busy day. I was actually, don't tell my boss this, I was at the driving range listening to you on the couch with Sigmund Bloom today. Quite an eventful show and quite a day. So we're happy to have you here. What are you swinging these days? Any new clubs? You get any new sticks for Christmas?
No new clubs, but I have historically been an over-tinkerer in golf, and if the process is correct, as we know in fantasy football, then you should not change. So I've tried to do that this season. I play in the winter. I come back to Texas specifically to play golf throughout the winter because it gets at most 35 degrees, and that's more than fine because every Southern person is terrified of that, whereas I will gladly put on the winter gloves and toboggan and NBC jacket and just go out at sunrise by myself and get a round in 2 hours. So I've tried to not change my grip, but keep the same swing and just minimize the tinkering pretty much. And that has helped me make much better contact with my middle irons because that's where I struggled pretty much. My short game is still the best thing I do. My driving sprays, but I can knock it far if I do 280 to 310. But the irons, the contact, you want to hear the clack. And that's what I wanted. And I have been hearing that the past month of my life, which makes life so much better.
That's awesome. Dwain, you a golfer? We never talked about that.
Not really, man. I used to until, kids, work, everything became all consuming. I used to play all the time, but in the last probably 10 years, I've hardly played at all. So
that's a shame.
Go to the range every once in a while.
It's honestly the most annoying and frustrating sport to exist. So I don't even know if it's suggested to everyone, but it is actually really refreshing. Like I said, sunrise, you're out there on your own or with a couple buddies. You have a podcast or you're streaming sports radio, and then you just go out there and practice. I love it.
Yeah. I like it because it's outside. That was always my favorite part about it, right? It's a chance to get outside. Usually at the course, you hear the birds, you hear nature, you hear everything going on. Like you said, you're with a few buddies. Always the camaraderie part of it was the big part of it for me. I was never a great golfer. I got to where I was decent, but just because I played so much, it wasn't really because, I was really that good. It's just when you play so often, eventually you can get, okay at something.
And to be fair, Dwain, I only picked it up a couple off seasons ago because my friends were taking trips to the mountains and playing, and I want to be in the mountains, and I don't ski or anything. I hate winter sports actually. And so the fact they were going to do something in the mountains, I figured, okay, I'll pick it up. And then my issue is that I am very competitive with myself above anyone else. And so it became a competition to always do better. The thing about golf, though, is I think Jim Nantz say it one time, that all you do is borrow greatness, then move on for a bit. Like, you're a good golfer for a few weeks, and then you're a bad golfer again. And so it's just a fool's gold to continue chasing the higher score, even though that's what I do all the time.
Yeah, it's really just chasing that one good shot. You could play a garbage round, and on 18, you hit a drive, you smoke it down the middle, like I said, 275 or whatever, and you go, that's right, I'm coming back.
That's what gets you out that next time for the
it's getting all those things
or whatever.
It's getting all those things to work together that was always the problem, right? It's like, oh, your
Still
short game is working really well one day, and then your driver's off. You're hitting the driver really well. Maybe you're hitting your mid irons well, and then the part of your game, like, John, you said your short game's usually your best part, and then all of a sudden that was the same for me, like when I was playing all the time. But then all of a sudden that would be off, and so trying to get all those facets to come together, that was like the puzzle, right? That always kept me coming back. And I don't know that I ever had a round where it truly just all perfectly clicked. I had some decent rounds where it was pretty close to that, but maybe one day when I have more time, I'll go back after that, just because I would like to experience that moment where all three are like simpatico, come together, have that great round. Of course, it probably won't happen, but that's what will get me hooked again, and then I'll start going all the time.
I was going to say, to be fair, that's evergreen. It's an ongoing puzzle forever. It never comes together, but it's still fun.
It's like a good draft. You want it all to come together, and at the end of it, you look at it and you go, oh my God, look at this team. I'm going to dominate this league. And hopefully, if you guys are listening, you're going to dominate your league this year. You're going to hear the sound of money going into your bank account, because we're all about cash and big checks. And the only sound besides hitting the iron pure you want to hear on the golf course is that, because you're out there chilling, relaxing, just like you are here with your boys at the Hustle. So again, if you want to check out John's great work, it is over at NBCSportsEdge.com. They have a new app out now. It's tremendous. If you ever used to use the old Roto World, we don't want to really say the name, but that's what the site used to be, and that went away. This new app is fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. Download it. You get this little blue icon on your screen. It's got all your trending news for fantasy football. It is a must-have for the fantasy player out there. Go check out John's work. Follow him on Twitter at NotJDaigle. I'm, of course, at Drake Fantasy, and Dwain is at Dwain McFarland. What we're going to get into tonight is hopefully the news of the day. We can scroll through all this. I got a couple of things I want to ask the boys. We're going to get into John's wide receiver tiers for best ball, because he's doing best ball drafts all the time. If you follow him, you'll see him post links. You can get into some drafts. I think on Fridays you're doing a lot of drafts, like happy hour time, right, John?
Correct. Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern with Pro Football Focuses, Brian and Dwayne, Ian Hartitz. Cool. And it's a different guest every single week. It's a different format. Last week, for instance, we did a 10-team Yahoo League with Scott Pianowski. We've also done Best Ball Manias. We did a 12-team league with Justin Herzig, who pretty much unlocked all the cheat codes for us, told us the exact number and roster construction of positions he's drafting every single week. So we try to just literally cover it all with a few drinks and jokes mixed in between.
Oh, that's so fun. Those are good guests. I love Scott Pianowski. He's one of the guys. We were talking before the show, a lot of wrestling, Dwayne, by the way, which you're lucky you didn't tune in for that.
You're lucky your internet connection went out. Yeah.
Yeah. Scott's one of the guys I would love to get on the show. I think he's just such a smart, great follow on Twitter.
Him and Sigmund Bloom are so good at what they do. Like, they are literally, I've always compared them to painters, like the Bob Ross of fantasy football. Like, they don't need words. They're literally painting like play-by-play guys description for us that I'm envious of, because I would love to write like that. They are just literally just good writers, not even fantasy football guys. They're just beautiful what they do.
Was today your first time on the couch, or you've been on there a few times with Sig?
I went on there 2 years ago. Last season, we didn't get to link up, but I've always stayed close with Sigmund. So it was just booking issue, I'm sure, but it doesn't matter. I love going on the couch specifically because it's different. It's like this show where we have our notes and prep and everything, but for Sigmund, he gives you one topic, he gives you one sentence, and you show up and have a good time for an hour, and it better stay under an hour, and then he'll branch out and talk about life. If you want to catch that tomorrow morning, it'll be on the Football Guys podcast feed, because the last 5 minutes we did go into my tales from Connecticut and like to go a little bit deeper, how I hit depression, and then I took off around the country, lived with Evan Silva, nomad tales. Like, we went through it all.
That's great. I was listening to most of it. I got to pick up on the end of it. I'd love to go on that show. That's the one show, Dwayne, I'd love to do. Not that I don't want to talk fantasy football. I just want to talk podcasting, content creation, writing. He's a Syracuse guy. That's where I live. So I don't know. That'd be a blast. If he ever gets bored, he runs out of every fantasy football guy in the country. I know he'll knock on my door at that point. But go check that out tomorrow.
And he lives in New Orleans, which is like perfect for his aura. Like it fits his description perfectly.
Let's get into it, guys. It's Julio Gate time. And now that we're past June 1st, Julio Jones will likely get traded so that the Falcons can free up enough money to sign their rookie class, which is, something I guess you want to do. So everyone's going to have their thoughts on this. Should they do it? Should they have drafted CeeDee Lamb last year if they knew this was going to come up? Should they have taken a quarterback? Whatever. We can go down that road. But spinning it towards fantasy, John, where do we hope he goes? And then we'll go into the fallout for the Falcons on Ryan, Ridley, Pitts, and if there's any other receivers out there. So where would you like to see Julio go for fantasy?
I mean, the destinations right now are tepid because I do not want to see him go to the Titans, this run first offense.
Thank you.
Even though I will say, like, if they are going to be inefficient under Todd Downing, they really don't have any star caliber defensive players whatsoever. And so if they are just going to be passing the ball more out of necessity, maybe that is good since Ryan Tannehill, we've seen, is a very good quarterback now in that system. Having said that, though, it's still worrisome just in case because it's a soft division. Colts also, we don't know what we're getting out of Carson Wentz. If we get 2017 Wentz, then sure, great, throw him in there. That's just fine. But I would still worry about that one. We have concerns over the passing volume if Trey Lance is a 17-game starter, since Trey Lance, as fun as he is a joystick. It's going to be so much more run heavier than it would be under Jimmy Garoppolo's command. So I worry about that as well. The Patriots, I think Matt Jones is a good quarterback, but can he carry Julio Jones, Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne in the red zone since he's more of a solid possession receiver and 2 tight end sets? I don't think so. So I don't want him to go to the Patriots either. And that's kind of the locations that are the favorites right now. So honestly, none of those. Green Bay would have been my dream situation. But again, I don't think that's going to happen at all. So that's kind of my answer. Green Bay, but I don't think that's the case.
What about you, Dwayne? Where would you like to see Julio end up?
Mine's the exact same. Like if I could pick a spot, it'd be Green Bay, right? And I'm with John. I mean, all the spots that are the most likely landing spots, like there's this ripple effect that you really don't want, right, on some of the other players in the offense. To John's point, like with Tennessee, it'd be very different, right? If they were more like last year's Falcons and they're willing to drop back, throw the ball 700 times, right? Then it's fine. You can have Julio, you can support AJ Brown. You can do a lot of things, but whenever you're an offense where we know they're going to at least try, now they could be forced, to John's point, to throw the ball more. There's nothing special on defense, but we also know that any game that Vrabel can keep his thumb on it, right, he's just a defensive minded head coach. And we see this time and time again with the offensive coordinators under these defensive, minded head coaches. We rarely get to see them spring free. Every once in a while, it's kind of like a unicorn, like that thing will show up. So I really don't want to see that happen to AJ Brown. My AJ Brown exposure is already pretty decent, like in the 20 best ball drafts that I've done. So, and not that AJ Brown wouldn't still hold value, but right now, he's got the upside to be the top receiver overall. So yeah, I think all the rest of the places, it's got a ripple effect that you really don't want to see, damage some of the other parts. I mean, there's other places he could go that literally has nothing, but he's not going to be willing to go there, right? Like the Lions, and there's a couple places like that. But Julio doesn't want to go finish his career with the Lions or with the Texans if they don't think they're going to have Deshaun Watson.
And
go ahead.
I was to say it's the same for the Ravens too. I saw them pop up, but the Ravens wide receivers have finished as a positional unit, bottom 2 in back-to-back years with Lamar Jackson and targets per game. We love Rashad Bateman as a talent, but the entire draft, even beforehand, we were hoping it was Kadarius Toney because we knew we were looking for a sacrificial lamb to that organization, knowing they were going to draft receiver with one of their top 31 picks. And it just happened to be Bateman, who even as a talented player, I don't think can overcome the situation as a boundary receiver with Lamar Jackson. So that's not a good fit either.
I heard today an interesting one, and it was the Los Angeles Chargers.
That's a good fit.
Wow,
yeah, that's a good one too, great. I think there could
Adam
be room
Kaplan
there.
said that on Sirius today. I thought,
Yeah,
wow,
I think there could be
interesting.
room there, right? I mean, you know, because he and Keenan do two different things. You know, Jared Cook doesn't have to be part of the offense. Obviously, Eckler's going to get to work underneath. But yeah, I think that one, you know, could work. And that would, and I love Justin Herbert already, so that would make me feel even better about Herbert.
If you told me to hone in your exposure, though, for best ball drafts right now to make sure we get these Papa shots right. Because remember, no matter where Julio lands, it's going to increase the ADPs of all. So we need to continue taking lucky shots and throw darts at double stacks here. I would say dwindle it down to 4 teams. The 49ers, who if the Falcons budge and take a couple second rounders, they understand their window to win is in Trey Lance's 5-year rookie deal. That's how you're going to maximize all the contracts with the rookie contract. And then the 3 AFC teams would be the Colts, the Raiders, and the Patriots. And those are the 4 teams I've been double stacking him with.
Interesting stuff there. Now, let's say he leaves, which seems likely. So Atlanta is left now with Calvin Ridley, who his best ball 10 ADP is 7. So I don't know how much higher it can go. And you've got the rookie tight end Pitts. And is there anybody else? I mean, worth kind of sneaking in here? The Zacchaeus or Russell Gage, who caught like 70 balls last year. I mean, anybody we want to take?
So remember, that's why it's a nuanced situation. I love talking about it because Kyle Pitts is a unicorn. We have no idea how to comp him. Calvin Ridley survived as a top 7 receiver, and drafters are too sharp now. He's being treated as a top 7 receiver already, even without Julio Jones being traded yet, because he had a 31% target share and 51% air yard share without Jones last year. The issue is that Ryan was bad without Julio last year. 57% completion rate, 6.1 yards per attempt, could not survive without Julio taking away defenders from Ridley. And then you're going to pop those guys you just mentioned in. Russell Gage, who is just a guy. Like his ADP has now soared up to rounds 12 through 15, but he's just a special team slot dude who doesn't move the needle either way. We're taking him specifically because he would fall into more opportunity, presumably. And then Olamide Zacchaeus is the long shot here that's going undrafted if you want to skip out on Gage entirely. But overall, it kind of gets ugly without Julio there. And remember that the Falcons' schedule is not good. They had 9 road games to begin with in a 17-game season, but then factor in that their home game in week 5 against the Jets is in London. So they have 10 road games. They have an early week 6 bye in the longest season we've seen ever, and then have to combat all of these schedule issues with no defense as well. So they're not going to bench Ryan mid-year because all they have is A.J. McCarron after passing on a quarterback, rightfully passing on a quarterback, by the way. But overall, the schedule is not promising for this offense and team whatsoever to actually be good this year.
Yeah, I think it does hurt the team overall, but I will say, like, it just turns. I mean, Calvin Ridley does become a slam dunk.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking here are the games, and you already kind of hit on it, Daigle, but it's like these games without Julio, and I'll go ahead and count, some of the weeks where Julio was basically in and out, right, and didn't get to play a ton.
Ignore the Packers game.
29%, 20, yeah. You got 29%, that's week 11. Yeah. And you got 38, 30, 28, 30%. I mean, so when you can get that kind of target share on a team that's going to have to throw, yes, Arthur Smith's going to try to implement more play action. He's going to try to do things to be more efficient versus volume, but it's going to shake out somewhere in the middle just because we know the Falcons defense, right, is not going to be very good. It would be kind of a miracle outlier kind of thing if they became good. I think the thing it does help is Kyle Pitts, because right now, basically, I never draft him, right, at his ADP. The problem is as soon as Julio's gone, it's probably going to go up, right, even more. So I think that the thing it would do for Pitts, because like in my original look at the Falcons, I had Calvin Ridley, right, as the lead. I had Julio as the second, missing a few games. And then I had Pitts really as the third guy. But I've seen a lot of people just saying, oh, Kyle Pitts, even if Julio's there, like 18 and 19% target share. I'm like, man, I just don't see that happening unless Julio's hurt a lot. I would see, there's a floor with Kyle Pitts that people aren't talking about. I love the player, right? Love the talent. You like to bet on the talent. But I mean, I think there's a floor where he could be in that like 8, 11, 12% range. We don't even know how often they'll put him on the field because they still have Hayden Hurst. What are they going to do with him? We have no clue yet how they're going to utilize the player. We have no clue, how often he's going to be, what will his routes per drop back look like? Now, we've had players here recently, historically, like post some really good seasons, even with their routes per drop back not being great. But they're kind of like Chase Claypool last year, right? He had one of those years where it was like, well, where's he going to fit? You already got Juju. You already got Deontay Johnson. James Washington's still kind of in the mix. You got Eric Ebron. But Claypool was able to come through with some big efficiency games, right? He had some of those huge games, even though he was only, he was running routes like 60%, 70% of the dropbacks, which typically isn't good enough. So I kind of look at Kyle Pitts. He needs to, like right now in the current iteration of the Falcons offense, he's got to kind of get lucky, like a Chase Claypool kind of thing last year. And even then it's like, is he really worth, where he's going? I will say when you get to that spot in the draft, which it'll be awesome walking through your tiers here in a minute on wide receiver, Daigle, because it does get to a spot in the draft where I think what happens to people is they're just like, I like all these guys the same. So it's like, I'm just going to take Kyle Pitts. It's like, I'm just going to go ahead and take this big swing, right? And see what happens, because everybody, I mean, there's no doubting the talent. There's always a chance it doesn't translate or he can't, something happens to him in the NFL, but I feel good about him, right? Everything about Kyle Pitts so far, right? I mean, the highest tight end ever taken, the highest non-quarterback, that wasn't a receiver or, offensive lineman taken, so I mean, he's done a lot of great things. So I anticipate that continuing on, but I do just feel like the price tag on Pitts is too much right now. So if somehow Jones left and Pitts' price tag didn't skyrocket more, which it probably would, I would feel a lot better about owning some Kyle Pitts because I could see, they're just going to use him as a weapon, right? At that point, you got to have Ridley and Pitts, and you probably have Hurst on the field. That may be your three. That may be your 3 wide set. I mean, they may just move him around, put him in motion, all sorts of stuff like that. But right now, Pitts is just really, really, really high price tag.
And that's the issue is that Pitts is being drafted at his ceiling right now outside of best ball 10s, which is why I love drafting 12-team leagues there because you can get him rather late. But overall, he's being drafted as the tight end 4. And if Julio is traded, we are assuming Julio is traded here, I will never get there. If he starts going beyond Darren Waller and George Kittle, I just mentally cannot. And so it's just hard to accept that I'm drafting him at his ceiling. If he ever falls, and even I don't even like doing this, but if I see him fall beyond TJ Hawkins sometimes in the 5th or 6th round, that's when I will get him, especially
I've done the same thing.
If I can double stack Ryan, Ridley, and Pitts, knowing Julio's gone, that's perfectly acceptable. I love doing that.
Yeah,
but
it's tough. It's so tough to pull that one off. I've tried that one a couple times.
Yeah.
Because you got to spend the 2nd rounder on Ridley, right? And then Pitts has to fall. And I know you've been there. It's one where it's like I've had so many of these where it's like it's about to work out perfectly, and the guy right in front of you just cuts you off.
So you know what you do?
Cut you off from your double stack. You're like, oh my god, it was almost there. And then you have to sign up for another one immediately.
You should treat Mike Davis as a double stack option.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a bit, but I love Mike Davis, pass catching back with Matt Ryan and whomever else you get. And then also always to your Falcon stacks, add a Bills player since they play each other in the premier game of week 17, since best ball championships are decided in week 17 this year. You're trying to set your stacks up for the championship game if you're even lucky enough to make there. I do the same with Chiefs and Bengals stacks since they play each other in week 17. So I never leave a draft without a Falcons and Chiefs, but then also Bengals or Bills to get ready for those matchups.
Oh, man, I like that. That's another layer. That's sweet.
I like that. I got a feeling that's going to end up on our PFF promo that we put out every week. So if you're wondering on best ball 10s, maybe it's a little soft there with Kyle Pitts. He's going off the board at 66 overall. He's tight end 6 there, according to their ADP, but I know if you go and bounce around, maybe go to underdog, he might be a little higher. We were talking about the Falcons. We were talking about Mike Davis. The Falcons did bring in 28-year-old Mike Davis on a $1.5 million deal for this year. It's a 2-year deal, actually. They can get out of it rather cheaply next year if they want to. The only other running backs on the roster are Kadri Allison, something called Tony Brooks James. I think he was a producer on The Simpsons. I'm not sure. Maybe James, whatever. And UDFA Twitter favorite Javion Hawkins from Louisville. So they could still reach into this free agent pool and add someone like an AP, Le'Veon Bell, Duke Johnson. You get the point. So with this uninspiring group available, guys, what are our 2021 expectations for Mike Davis, who has a best ball 10 ADP right now of 61 overall, which is running back 27?
I would like to start with you, Dwayne. I'm curious to get your take on Mike Davis because I seem to be hired in the industry and I don't understand. I listen to everyone. I am more than open always to jostling my opinions to very smart people. But I don't understand why people aren't coming with me. So I want to hear your take on it.
He's been sneaking up. It's more, around, his quads that look, more like our torsos. But,
wait till you see the Gio Bernard picture that just came out.
It's quite sexy.
I do remember last year, right, when Jonathan Taylor, it was like at a camp where they weren't even tackling, like, and he blew, like, he ran through like a pad or something that like a coach was holding, and like he made this long run, and like Twitter went nuts over that. That's how starved we were last year with COVID. We had no real football early on. But man, I'm with you. Here's my thing with Mike Davis. Every time the guy's been given a chance, he's done well. He did it in Seattle. He's done it in Carolina last year. And he's shown that he can handle the volume, so that's the other part of it. And Daigle, I think you're hitting the nail on the head that he is he's not like a huge threat, but he's a very capable pass, receiver. And if you look at the Falcons, especially if they move away from Julio, what could that potentially look like? The Arthur Smith didn't throw to the backs a lot last year. If you look at the way they attack the field, right, use a lot of play action, don't hit much underneath, at least not to the backs, but they're really targeting that intermediate, right, and the deeper areas of the field. The tight ends are typically on more shallow routes, like the drags, the stuff like that. But I do think, everything's about how this current roster is constructed. So I think Mike Davis, for me, I have no issues. I think he's the clear-cut lead back on an offense that's going to run quite a few plays. I just don't understand what there's not to like. I really liked it a couple weeks ago when he was even cheaper. His price is going up a little bit, but the theme that I seem to hear, John, and I don't know what your thoughts are, but people get really, really hung up. And I get this argument, right? They get really hung up on the talent. They're like, well, I'm not going to draft, Mike Davis whenever this receiver name is there, right? Tyler Lockett, right? That kind of thing. I know Tyler Lockett's a really talented receiver. And I'm like, guys, like, have you not been paying attention? Like, for the last 5 years, like, Twitter's blown up about really how talented does a running back even have to be to score fantasy points, right? It's all back to this do running backs matter kind of stuff. Like, the volume's going to be there. I just don't see anyone to challenge him on the roster. So I'm with you. Whenever I'm going like modified RB, I love getting my RB1 right in the first round, coming back and going receiver, and then coming back in that fifth round. And I love having Mike Davis as my RB2 and sometimes my RB3. Like, I'm down with it.
So to your point, well, one, people should be higher on Tyler Lockett. He's getting penalized incorrectly for, even though he had just 6 fewer fantasy points all year than DK Metcalf. Everyone sees his second half, but it doesn't matter because he won 4 weeks single-handedly for you, and that's what matters in best ball. But to go back to Mike Davis, it is strictly about the opportunity, and Davis was basically Antonio Gibson coming out of college. He was strictly a pass-catching back. That's what he showed in Seattle and Chicago, and then in Carolina as well. But with Carolina, of course, he did get a career high in carries. And I don't know if that's going to happen again, but I do know, because not only do I do it the best ball tiers, I also keep track of available opportunity, which always needs context, by the way. But if you just even Google available targets and air yards, unaccounted for carries, I keep track of the numbers missing from last year's production when players move on in free agency or trades, releases, whatever it is. And the fact is that the Falcons have the most available carries, 364 missing from last year's production. That does not tell me Mike Davis steps in and gets all of them, but the number I've been using, even if he gets half of those, like, that's more than enough carries that could also lend itself to a career high. But we also know this defense is just outright bad. And so we know they're going to be passing the ball, and that's what he does best. So Kadri and Javion Hawkins won't even be on the field at that point. So I have him right now in my RB tiers. as the RB18. And I take pride in my tiers because I try to go over and under ADPs. I want people to get edges. I don't want you to just come in and be a median drafter. And actually, Davis, around RB18, after Chris Carson and the third tier, is where I've been taking him over Chase Edmonds, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, for example, because the opportunity is much better than all those guys, in my opinion. And so that's where I'm going to leave him.
I had Mike,
but I think the logic is correct, and I mean he has shown that he can be a 3-down back. We saw that, so I mean I think that's important. If some of the other guys don't flash enough in camp to even make their way onto the field much, I mean I think there really is I like using what you said. Hey, even if he just gets half, right? That's great. But I think the reality is he's going to be more like 65% to 70%.
I agree. Yeah. I agree. And by the way, Permar in the chat, a very sharp player who is in a lot of drafts I do and is a friend enough to join us every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. He mentions Davis wore down in the second half of the season. I have seen that logic used, but I have an issue with that because remember, it was a career high in touches by 100 for Mike Davis. So of course he got tired as a 3-down option, but we're now a full off season removed. And throughout camp, throughout OTAs, Davis is being treated as the every down option. So I don't worry about him wearing down after he received that amount of touches last year.
Yeah, the other thing I would say with that one, is when you look at it, when you look at the Panthers and the iteration of what we saw with the Panthers last year, as Teddy Bridgewater, who does not really stretch the field vertically, doesn't make defenses respect that. That makes things tougher for running backs underneath in the passing game. It makes things tougher for running backs in the running game. So I think from the Falcons' standpoint, the mode of offense they're going to run is going to offer some efficiency upside, right? We know yards per carry can be a very random kind of thing, but I'm expecting some major efficiency upside in Arthur Smith's offense. You're going to get the benefit of a lot of play action. You're going to get the benefit of, a different style, of running. And then I think you're also going to get, the benefit. So when you stretch the field out like that, and then you do hit the backs out of the backfield, you're just creating that much more space for them. And you're a less predictable offense, right? That's what Arthur Smith's all about. That's what Kyle Shanahan's about. That's what Sean McVay's about. They always want the element of surprise. That's why they bake everything to make it look together. And you just don't know which cake is it going to be, right? You don't know, is this going to be a chocolate cake or is it going to be a vanilla cake, right? Because it basically looks the same until it comes out of the oven. So I think there's going to be a really big opportunity, for some efficiency increase, right? It's not something like I'm going to project that really huge, because you guys that know how I do projections, that's like the biggest way that people kind of get in their own way whenever they're doing their projections, right? Is they want to give somebody this super high efficiency and then it just basically blows your process up. But I think there is upside for Davis in this offense versus what he was in with Carolina. And it's more about Bridgewater, not the Carolina scheme.
I'm going to go along and agree with Permar from our chat. And I was a Mike Davis owner in several leagues last year, and I saw this perceived breakdown. And if you look at the fantasy football playoffs, Mike Davis killed you last year, and it could leave a bad taste in some folks' mouths. Look at weeks 14 and 15 in the fantasy playoffs. He rushed 14 times for 59 yards. He caught 2 balls for 2 yards in week 14. If you somehow survived that and got to your semifinals, he rushed 14 times for 28 yards, did happen to fall into the end zone. He made his hay as a receiver, and that's what we all know because he scored 8 touchdowns as a receiving back.
But he didn't anybody, Drake.
Yeah, but he didn't.
Derrick Henry literally cost me $500,000 last year. Like it can happen to any back,
right? But I'm worried that they're going to go out and they're going to find. Imagine if Adrian Peterson gets signed by this team, right? And they bring him in and they say, we're going to do what Adrian Peterson does. And we're just going to pound him between the tackles. Because Mike Davis only ran for over 80 yards twice last year. I mean, you look past, geez Louise, when did he do it? Week 5? I mean, he never cracked 70 yards on the ground. So it's all upside in the passing game. If they bring in a thumper that's going to steal his early down work, I think he's going to take a nosedive. Because then you don't get any of that on the ground. He's not like some great goal line back.
Yeah, but that's kind of shoulda, woulda, coulda. Like if that happens, we'll adjust, right? But I think
by the way,
projecting that they're going to bring somebody in, I think it's just tough to do that.
And I pride myself on thinking like 3 steps ahead. And like trying to create an edge and thinking forward. That's why I have Dallas Goedert over Kyle Pitts, because we've known Zach Ertz is getting traded for a month. So it doesn't make any sense to me that Pitts is going over Dallas Goedert when Goedert ran a route on 99% of Hurts's dropbacks last year in the 3 games that Zach Ertz missed. Having said that, to me, Atlanta adding another back would be luck. And that I can't factor in. I can't take into account that. So I'm not projecting at all. Thus, I'm not treating the situation like that.
Yeah, and it could happen through the Julio trade, right?
It could, definitely could.
Like that, they could bring backs back through the trade. There's all sorts of things that could happen, and I'm with you. Like, I can't factor in the luck. I'm totally with you. We're playing chess, not checkers. But some things, if you start trying to get so out there with projecting those things, basically, like, to me, you lose your foundation, right? Because now you're just kind of throwing darts. I was having this conversation around a whole different topic the other day on Twitter about everybody just trying to say, who's the stack this year, right? It's going to be Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. And people are literally throwing out everything just because Josh Allen had this huge accuracy turnaround, right? Stephon Diggs comes onto the team and boom. It's like we probably won't have one of those this year. That's the real point, right?
It's the wrong. I've seen it too, Dwayne. It's just the wrong comparison. I hate when people mention it, because that was an organization making a player better and being unique, like to run the 4th highest rate of play action, but to basically not do it with a running game whatsoever, to ignore your running backs. No team is going to do that. Josh Allen also, like, sure, he does so much more than any other quarterback that he's being compared to. So I hate that comparison so much.
Yeah, and I think, I get the logic, right? People are trying to say, well, what's the stack that's going to win it all for me? Because my best team last year in FFPC had Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Derrick Henry, Justin Jefferson. I mean, I had, a loaded squad. Like, it was in the top 5 going down to the last week. But when I drafted Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs last year, I'll be honest with you, I was drafting Josh Allen because he was just going too late. Last year, you get in the 9th and 10th round of FFPC drafts. And Stephon Diggs was just a talented player that was falling to the 6th and 7th round, right? I felt that where he landed, it was basically priced in. I was fine stacking them, but I did not anticipate and I did not project that I was going to get what I got out of that situation. I mean, so I think it's just, it's an example. We do it every year, right? You're going to see it with rookie receivers this year because of what Justin Jefferson did. Everybody looks back at the trend from last year, and what they don't realize, like, is everything changes every year, right? Sometimes things repeat themselves, sometimes things don't, and sometimes you don't see something repeat itself for 3 or 4 years, right? What Josh Allen did, we've actually never seen. Like, if you look at his accuracy charting data, going back and looking at all the rookies that posted numbers similar to what he did, like, there's no one. The closest example is Stafford, and Stafford wasn't as bad as Allen early on, but those are literally the only 2 that overcame the seasons that they had being so bad with their accuracy. And I'm just not talking, target, I'm not just talking like adjusted completion percentage or completion percentage. We're talking about literally the accuracy charting, right, that PFF does. How many of them are on target within the frame versus how many of them are overthrown, uncatchable. I mean, Josh Allen's numbers were like some of the worst you've ever seen. And it's real. You don't typically see quarterbacks turn their accuracy around that much. So it's like you hit on that. Then what you just said, Daigle, they totally flipped the script on the offense and went to like just basically 70% pass, right? And then you had the perfect storm of Stephon Diggs was really the alpha. And like all those things came together.
So I was down on Diggs last year. I was a donkey. I lost out on Diggs last year. Even though RotoViz, they were championing him. He just said, hey, a talented player is moving a team. Who cares? It's one of the best receivers in the league. You were right. Like, that's the way we should have approached it, Dwayne. In fact, I just pulled this stat up because I remember tweeting about it last year at some time. Since 2009, prior to last year, there were 77 wide receivers to average 10 fantasy points per game in a season and then change teams. And only 26% of them improved on them per game output after the following year. The difference last year, and which is a knock I'm using for Will Fuller, and it could be incorrect. And I'm not under ADP by a lot, slightly below. But I will say last year's talent that moved skewed the numbers because it was also DeAndre Hopkins and Stephon Diggs moved. Yeah, that's not even fair. Like, we literally took 2 top 5 receivers in the league, changed teams, and go figure, they were amazing even so. So I think I still use that stat about wide receivers moving teams, like your Marvin Jones or whatever, even though he does know the playbook when he lands. But overall,
it really is, and I know this is my thing on Twitter, but context really does matter. Like
absolutely,
these numbers. And it's the same thing with best ball, right? When you people say, hey, here's how your best ball strategy should work. Like coming into last year, it's like, wait on your quarterback until 12th round. Well, yeah, when Patrick Mahomes in 2018 and then Lamar Jackson is your 2019 12th round quarterback, it looks like that's the perfect strategy. And it can still be a good one, but you've got to have a candidate that you think can do the kind of thing that they're doing in the 12th round, which last year we really didn't have, right? Because Allen was going a little bit ahead of that. This year you thought maybe that would be Jalen Hurts, but like everything's already out of Jalen Hurts, everything's priced in pretty much on him, already. So it's interesting. Like I love the trends and I love looking at that data, but anytime I see those kind of things, I will literally go back and track down and look at the players that drove that just to verify. And sometimes it's actually 100% right on. It's just like a glob of players that you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But other times it's like just what you said. You're like, oh, well, Stephon Diggs and DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, no wonder, right?
And that's why I like like you said, the macro sense of it. Sorry, Brian, we're just kind of cutting you off. I apologize.
I'm 3 topics down the road here looking up stats. Don't worry about me.
From a macro sense of it, that's why it makes a lot of sense to everyone says like zero running back or something like that. I never say go buy a certain draft strategy. I always say if you can remember a fucking quote from Anchorman, take 4 or 5 strategies into your draft. You can remember those and then play the board, play the room. I will never say like, oh, only be a zero running back lot or anything like that because it's just wrong.
Yeah. Every year and every draft is different, right? As to which one of those strategies may be more successful more often.
Yeah.
That's just, I do love a lot of the best ball roster construction stuff, that's out there. There's a lot of really good stuff. I love Jack Miller's stuff. There's a lot of good stuff going around.
Leone, Zach Reese, like all are doing such good job like that.
Like where we are now with our analysis of that, like compared to like 5 years ago, it's like mind blowing. I'm like, these people are like really doing innovative, cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
Drake, your show.
Yeah, sorry. Somebody who used to be doing cool stuff was Ben Roethlisberger. Remember when he was kind of this Konami code quarterback? Like, wow, Ben runs and, he's, mobile and he's going to score all these touchdowns with his legs. He ran for 11 yards last year. All right. Ben Roethlisberger, the news broke today that he said a few interesting things, excuse me. First off, the elbow surgery that he had prior to last year said it was a full reconstruction of his elbow. And in the offseason, he threw thousands of balls and he felt fatigued at the end of the 2020 season. And it showed. I mean, the team lost 4 of their last 5 games. He didn't play in the final game of the regular season, and he still finished 3rd in the NFL with 608 attempts. So if he probably would have played that last game, he would have led the league in attempts on a fully reconstructed elbow. Secondly, he noted that under Matt Canada, the new offensive coordinator, the Steelers offense won't look anything like we've seen in the past. That's what piqued my interest, and I want to talk to you gentlemen about. So thoughts on Ben, this new elbow, maybe he's taken a lot of time off to rest it for 2021, and what could we expect from Najee Harris, from Deontay Johnson, Juju's back, and the Steelers offense who, I mean, you put all these weapons on the table, this offense stacks up with anybody in the NFL. I mean, they've got 4 legit wide receivers and a nice new rookie running back. So we don't talk about the Steelers like we did last year. Remember how much we talked about James Conner last year, Dwayne? Nobody's talking about the Steelers offense this year.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
John, you go first on this one. You have the runway. I'll sit on the tarmac and wait a minute.
I know you're a Najee guy, right?
So I think you shouldn't have started me because I have a hot take on the organization. I think we are 1 year away from the Steelers rebuilding, and I'm trying to get ahead of it. Nothing they're doing makes sense. To run out 39-year-old Ben Roethlisberger, who got away with averaging a league-high 40.5 pass attempts per game last year because in hindsight, they played the second softest schedule of opposing pass defenses. That's not the case this year. But then to try to fix their running game with Najee Harris, as opposed to adding above average talent to the offensive line that lost 3 starters from last year. They're going to plug in a 3rd-round center instead of having all-pro Marquise Pouncey available this season. And then not to mention just that, but what they build on is their defense. That's been their proud unit no matter what's happened on offense. And yet they lost Mike Hilton, Steven Nelson, and Joe Hayden is playing out the final year of his deal this season at 32 years old. And so I genuinely believe with the schedule as well that they're just a catastrophe waiting to happen. They're going to feed Najee Harris, but I don't know how much it will matter if, again, Roethlisberger fails him like the second half of the season. The fact that he only threw 11 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in that span, and then he posted one of the worst halves of postseason football we've ever seen, literally ever, since like the 1960s. But then to also, if you take out his second half against the Colts that skewed his numbers, it would have been that second half of the season even worse than what is already looks horrendous. So I'm trying to get ahead of this. I've seen the numbers. Sharp people tell me, they've gone 17 years as a winning organization, never finishing below 500. But they're not going to win 9 games because Bill Cowher was a good coach. Why do I give a shit about that?
It's like the most meaningless stat.
Yeah,
ever.
Exactly. And so, I've been trying to get ahead. I think Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, Chase Claypool have high floors. But overall, I can't touch anyone else because I'm worried about a disaster happening.
So what I'm hoping here, and I think you're right, John. I think we're very close to like the end. Like it's about to collapse. They've got to do something. They could salvage some things just by getting another quarterback, but we all know that's not very easy, right? Especially when you're winning enough games that it keeps you out of the top where you could actually draft, a quarterback. But Randy Fichtner is gone. That's a positive in itself. Last year, the Steelers only ran 10% of their passes were play action. Now, I do think part of that is Ben, and that's the other thing I'll say, Drake, about Canada. Ben will go along with his coordinator so long, and then if it's just not working, he's not real patient. Basically, he becomes the coach again, and he just says, no, here's what we're going to do. And what he's used to right now at this point in his career is being in shotgun, doing the pre-read, trying to get the ball out quick, doesn't hold the ball a long time like he used to, right? He's much more of a Peyton Manning type quarterback end of his career now. Get the ball, get it out quick. Now, luckily, he has multiple weapons that he can get it to, but there's a lot of other things that Canada could do to really help this offense. So if you look at like the things that like the Shanahans of the world, the McVays of the world, even the LaFleurs of the world, they use way more motion. They use a lot more jet sweep action. They use a lot more trick play type looks. Anything you can do that makes the defense have to pause, like just for that extra half second. Again, back to the element of surprise where they've got to stop and think a little bit more right as the snap's happening, just to give you that little bit of an extra edge, right, that you need. And so I'm hopeful that what you get out of that this year is you can get a little bit more efficiency, because they need to bring the attempts down, right? I would worry about Ben's having the same problems, this year towards the end of the year that we, at the end of the year that we saw last year, if they expect him to go out there and do the same thing. So I do think there's room though for the offense to improve, just because Randy Fichtner literally did none of those things. He was basically like old school Mike McCarthy that Aaron Rodgers would complain about, right? It's just basically, hey, the other team knows our play before we even snap the ball. We just line up and we run it, right? And there's something to be said for that. Some offenses can just go out and out execute you. They do have 3 good wide receivers. Eric Ebron's an okay tight end. So I'll be interested. I think they're all priced fine. They're not really that expensive. So I like that. I think Deontay is typically he's the first one I usually see go off the board. It's around round 5. I don't have a problem with that. That's mainly I've just been doing underdog here lately. So that's where I see him go. Then the next round, Claypool comes off, and then the next round, Juju comes off. I think that's probably the appropriate order, because I do think that Claypool probably offers, more upside, than Juju. Juju offers probably a decent floor, but I don't see them going to like a 12 style personnel or 21, because I just don't think Ben with his mobility is really, I don't know how much play action they can even really bake in, right? As these guys get older, you even saw this, with Phillip Rivers and some of these other guys, I think they're hesitant with the play action stuff, just because, I think it's harder on them physically over the course of the year. So
they don't want to turn their back on the defense because they can't get back around.
Right. Yeah. So exactly. So the Najee Harris thing, and it's actually something I really wanted to study, Drake, and I haven't had a chance in the offseason, was actually taking a look at some of these older quarterbacks, right? And in using play action, what is there anything to that, right? And even using and like how often they're using play action. But Najee Harris, I'm all over it. I think, Drake, we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. He's going mid to end of the second round. I think that's fine. He'll probably be going to at the early end of the second round by the time, some preseason games happen and people see him. I think, and it doesn't really matter to me what iteration of this offense. I think he's going to get it all because we know Mike Tomlin, he's told us, he's actually he talks about his running game and the template of it. And he says they actually truly see value in having one guy running the ball because they truly believe it's like this glove in hand kind of scenario where the back and the linemen know each other really well, right? And they're all in a groove together. And so when a coach has a belief like that, that's why you see him continue to try to have one back. He could never make it happen with James Conner, obviously, because of the injury situation. But when I look at the rest of the roster and what's sitting on there, I don't see anything challenging, right, to Najee Harris. I think Najee Harris has a chance for 280, 300 carries and 50 targets. Like, I think that's in his wheelhouse for this year. In fact, I think Najee Harris has a higher floor than Jonathan Taylor. That's what I would say.
Whoa.
So one, I will agree. And remember that's how they treated James Conner. The issue was that in having the highest pass play rate in neutral game script last year, there just wasn't many touches to go around. I'd look down because I do the stats, all week long to catch up on everything for DFS or season long articles. And I'd see, James Conner, 80+% of the team's backfield touches. That's amazing. It's 11 to 13 touches. Like, yeah, it just doesn't matter at all. It's like Bills backs. Like, if one commands the share, it just doesn't matter because they don't get touches anyways. Having said that, I think the RB7 to RB14, 15 range is the most interesting topic in fantasy football. And I never try to parse. I don't even like talking about parsing like RB9 or RB10 because we live 80 years and then we die. We don't have time to talk about fractional differences in fantasy football. Having said that, you have your pick of the litter in drafts this year. So you kind of have to get it right because the guy you're going to be overweight on is the guy you're picking over 7 other guys. And I could see the case being made for all of them. But to your point, Dwayne, I have Najee Harris in tier 2, by the way, as my RB15 overall, and then have players like Gibson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Austin Eckler, et cetera, over him. So that's where I'm at. I still think he's in the same tier as those guys, tiers being the bottom guy can finish and exceed the top guy easily. Cam Akers. Najee Harris could outproduce Cam Akers. No big deal. But I still rank him lower than those because of the offense he's in. So where do you put him then as your RB9 or 10? Like, who is he over?
Right. Yeah. And I think, it's to your point, like some of that does come down to preference for folks, right? There's a lot of smart people and you're doing your research. And, my answer is I'm going to mix it up some because I'm going to draft quite a few teams. But I also know we have a lot of people that listen that they literally do 1 or 2 teams, right? That's it. That's all they've got. So you got to be more willing to plant your flag, on that kind of situation. For me, I typically always lean to utilization, and the workloads. Like, that's the number one thing I want. Hopefully talent intersects with that, which I think it does with Najee Harris, right? You got a first round back. Obviously we know Jonathan Taylor is uber talented, but I know Naheem Hines' role is not going away, right?
Correct.
He's a very specific type of back. He's got a coach in Sirianni, right? That uses that sort, they like that, right? They like being able to use, it's Frank Reich, and they like being able to use, that type of back. I was thinking of Sirianni, Drake, and moving over to your team. But I just think, and then they re-signed Marlon Mack, and that's also with Frank Reich. We've seen him be willing to use 3 backs. And it's not that Jonathan Taylor won't lead the team in carries, but it's just enough that it's a pain in the ass, right, to have to deal with it. And you don't know which weeks it's going to show up. So Jonathan Taylor, though, he still has huge upside. Like, I look at it like 2 years ago with Derrick Henry, right? You knew that the game scripts needed to play out right for Derrick Henry to have a huge season. And it was really similar last year, but last year you didn't have Deion Lewis, so he got to stay on the field even a little bit more, but the game scripts really worked in his favor last year. It's going to be the same kind of thing with Jonathan Taylor, right? If they get behind, right, or they're in a game where they got to be in a shootout, and they got to use the 2-minute offense more, Jonathan Taylor's just not on the field. right, in those situations. Whereas I think Najee Harris is going to have a chance to have all those roles. I think he'll be the long down and distance back. I think he'll be the 2-minute offense back. I think he'll be their grinder. I literally think the only thing he'll have is a change of pace. I don't think he's going to have, they're going to have multiple roles for all these other backs where they got to get them on the field. I think that's a bigger risk, for the Colts.
I love it. We're getting some talk here in the chat room. Our buddy Permar99 is asking Daigle about CEH. Says you're a flag planter about CEH, that he's not a goal line back. Discuss.
So those that were fortunate enough to be watching this live, I just looked over my phone because I had to check my exposure. I've been doing drafts since March. 12-man leagues I don't do, by the way, and underdog because it's too sharp. It's just no point in doing it there. You should be on best ball 10s or drafters doing that. And because remember, 12-man leagues, 3-man leagues, that's where your real ROI is going to come back to, even though to play for $1 million is a lot of fun. So don't let me stop you there. That's where I play my tournaments as underdog. But I just looked at all my exposure and I have CEH, number one player right now. Accidentally, I didn't even mean for this to set this up. 58% exposure right now. So it's very clear I'll be overweight on him because recall, without Le'Veon Bell, he did average 17.5 carries and 5 targets per game and was the goal line back. Now, he wasn't good at punching in those carries inside the 5, but he was the team's primary goal line back in those first 6 games. And then the corpse of Le'Veon Bell was added. And then we saw in the postseason that didn't matter at all. So returning as the team starting back with the same guys who didn't threaten him last year, I could see the argument for Jerick McKinnon to be the passing down guy. But overall, I will be all in on CEH as I am yet again.
I'm so happy that we're getting folks in the chat room here. And if you're not following us on YouTube, you should be. If you're listening to the podcast as you're driving in your car, when you're safe at a location, maybe a stoplight or something, we know everyone's on their phone in their car. Let's be honest. Just pick it up, go to YouTube, search Fantasy Football Hustle, hit that subscribe button. You can check out all our cool videos. We're talking with John Daigle, NBC Sports Edge Football. Now we're going to get in finally to his wide receiver tiers, the whole reason that he's here. But we've had almost an hour of fantastic football talk about everything else besides wide receivers. So let's get into this. Go over to NBCSportsEdge.com. You can find his best ball wide receiver tiers. In the first tier, John, no real surprises. It's Tyreek, Stephon Diggs, all the names you would kind of, know and think about. Was there any big discrepancy? Anyone you were like, I want to try to squeeze him into tier 1, or this is kind of just the easiest part of the article?
No, I went in thinking Justin Jefferson and DK Metcalf were going to be in there, but you can't when people are drafting Calvin Ridley over him. It just doesn't make sense to have them, even though DK Metcalf for the first 9 games was the wide receiver 1. But again, that production wasn't going to be sustainable and clearly was not sustainable as Seattle's offense tanked in that second half of the season. So I am fine with these guys because all could be the wide receiver 1.
I love this article because
thank you.
I'm a guy who, I like stats. Obviously, I've been talking to Dwain for 4 years. I'm doing this PFF thing. But you give some really nice nuggets here. You're not beating anybody over the head, making them read an encyclopedia. It's like, hey, boom, DeAndre Hopkins. Here's a couple of sentences, some stats, bing, bang, boom, on to the next guy. So for you folks who might get scared off by some stuff like that, this article is for you.
To be fair, it still is a lot of words. I try to keep it with notes, though, just in case anyone needs to reference anything and try to tell a quick story. Also, I have this issue. I don't know if y'all have this issue. This is probably the boomer in me speaking. And no offense to anyone who does it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But contextually, if I try to slide in like tweets or anything to my articles, I think it looks sloppy. So I will never be a plant tweets and articles guy. Again, that might be the boomer in me.
You guys work for NBC, PFF, and ETR. Go read some of my articles at fightingchancefantasy.com and our WordPress site or whatever the hell that thing is. And I can show you some sloppy tweets and put in articles. But no, this looks fantastic.
Don't be down in your work. You were up for Fantasy Football Article of the Year, sir.
I was, and I've got another one coming out that will win this year.
I love your little blogs that you sometimes just post out of nowhere. It's just it'll be a slow evening, and you write about life. And I love that stuff.
I like when I go scorched earth on people because I see I don't get into Twitter as much. I'd love to ask you about
Here we go, Daigle. This is the part where Drake takes over. Drake,
now it goes off the rails.
Let's go.
But so my next article that I'm doing is kind of long form, and it's about what is making it in fantasy football, because there's a lot of folks out there that think, making it is writing for Pro Football Focus. It's writing for NBC Sports Edge. It's getting the ETR, it's doing shows with Silva and all that. Where, there's guys on there who do really good work. They've been on there for a long time who don't, they don't work for a big site, but there's guys who complain, why am I not getting a job? And why am I not working for this guy? And my thought process is, you're already doing it. Who cares if you're making $10 an article from some website? Trust me, these guys are not getting rich anywhere in fantasy football, making multi-millions of dollars a year. Like, you can be your own guy and create content, and you made it. You're doing it. If someone's reading your work and you've got engaged Twitter followers, guess what? You made it. You're already doing it. You don't need the gratification or the stamp of approval from, FTN or any of these sites to say we're hiring you, or Football Guys or whoever. That's just my take. And I've got really good quotes from Bob Harris, from Sigmund Bloom, from Ryan Reynolds, Drew Davenport, guys like that. It's going to be a really nice article. But what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I have. We could talk about this for hours. One, do not be the guy that complains about your situation, or the girl or the woman who complains about your situation, because I guarantee you those tweets are probably in text threads everywhere. And you don't want to be the person that has all their social media surface around those text threads, because there's a lot of stuff going on in those text threads. So delete those tweets right now if you're complaining, by the way. That's not how you're going to get noticed.
The site that didn't pick you,
no,
right? And then tweet about it. That's just a really bad look.
Hidden close to home, Dwayne. It's all hidden close to home. Also, I will say, like, if you want to talk to someone about the journey, like, I'm the journey guy. Like, it reminds me, this is for Brian. We're going to go to Brian's side of the show now, where he knows Kevin Owens, as John Cena was filling stadiums. Kevin Owens was one of the best wrestlers in the world. But he was on the indies. And so everyone knew about him, but he was not getting the same recognition as John Cena was, like, internationally. He was just well respected throughout the industry.
Everyone loved Kevin Steen.
Of course, Fight Steen Fight. And I was coming up as JJ, Reeves, Overzet, Denny Carter, who, by the way, like, I don't know if people know Overzet and Denny Carter are, like, part of the OGs of the industry with Bob Harris and everyone, and Ray Flowers. But, like, they have been in this game for so long and just didn't catch a break or, like, find their opportunity for later on. I was coming up with them, but I was not in the same email threads and whatnot, because I had to go a completely different path for my opportunity to happen. And as I tell everyone, you just work your ass off and then get lucky. And getting lucky is the hard part, but you have to really get lucky to fall into a situation. And so when Silva reached out to me that one day, 2 DMs, by the way, his number, and then call me, I called him, and just like I had worked my ass off to that point. I was 30 at that time. I'm 33 now, or like 29 at that time. I worked my ass off to that point, though, where I was ready to swing for the fences the moment I got that opportunity. So putting in the work, no matter how long it takes. And like I said, I took the longest path here, as Kevin Steen did, until he showed up with the NXT title and told John Cena, I don't want to fight you because I don't care. I've been in this game as long as you have. It just might take longer, but that's okay. You have to stay positive the entire time.
I had the same exact experience with Silva. Get a DM. It's like 1 a.m. I'm in here doing research. He's like, hey, you up? I'm like, type back in the DM Twitter. Yep.
Is this for me?
Yeah. He's like, can I give you a ring? And we're on the phone. It's like 1 a.m. talking football. We just sitting there talking football. That's how it started, right? And yeah, it was an interesting thing. I think you're hitting on a lot of the right stuff. What I would tell people is, you do have to work hard, right? Treat other people well. Don't be a dick. And I know I've had my time where I know I've probably been a dick. You catch me on a wrong day, and I can definitely have a bad day. But be good in the industry, work really hard, but also be business savvy. I did a lot of work behind the scenes, like working and networking and creating a brand for myself and finding something that was truly differentiated from what other people were doing in the marketplace that I knew there was a need for, not just to have it so I could say I have this other different thing. Right. And other people were doing a lot of the same things. I was just doing it really in a different way, right? In a way that could be packaged. And so like you do have to think of it, like a business. You don't just think of it as, oh, well, I'm going to show up and research and then my research is going to be good and then I'm going to make it. Like, yeah, that all has to happen. But then you got to be able to package it all up, right?
Yes.
So like with football guys, like it was, the projection spectrum that they loved, right? Which was really forecasting a range of outcomes for players. And like people just loved it. Like for Pro Football Focus and for ETR, it was the utilization reports. They loved it. But I had branded it, right, as something and tested. I built it on Twitter. And when Twitter would start reacting to stuff, that's how you know you're onto something. So if you're putting stuff out there and people aren't glomming on, don't blame them. That means that you got to tweak it. You need to do something different. And like you talked about with Overzet and some of these other folks, that it took them longer. Sometimes you just haven't really hit your spot, right? Or your stride, or I call it the sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Where you're really in that journey and everything clicks for you, and I think it can truly happen, for a lot of people,
of course,
but you can't also just think that it's only hard work and that you sit back. And I do agree with John. Some of it is definitely luck, but I try to bend the luck curve as much as I can. I think, there's different ways that you can approach that, but be a business person about what you're doing. Think through it like you're running a business already before you're even working for somebody else. And then when you get into those conversations, like I just remember they're like, wow, they're like, you came up with this idea and then you built that out. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, here's this other thing I'm working on. They're like, oh man, that's really cool. Well, we'd like you to do that for us. It wasn't just, oh, I'm doing research and I'm going to show up and write you an article. Like I was pitching them a product.
Yes.
Right. So that's my 2 cents that I would give to people.
And luck, by the way, is a skill. I know it seems crazy to say, but like there's a reason. I mentioned this to him. I did the 12-hour COVID relief stream last year during the pandemic, had all the friends and guys from around the industry on the show and women to jump in who were kind enough to join at one point. And Levitan came on and I even asked him, I said, like, I see it from afar. Everyone else might see it as falling into something. I see landing with DraftKings, like playing poker tournaments, landing with ETR. Like it might seem like opportunity or opportune times to others, but there's a skill involved there for you to get lucky every single situation in life. So like, how do you go about that? What are you even like doing to set yourself up for success? And I genuinely just think it comes down to being prepared to take the bat, but you have to put on all those works. If you get called up from double A and you just haven't had the work yet, you don't even know how to handle it. But if you're doing everything behind the scenes and not complaining about it, by the way, just doing everything behind the scenes, eventually the time will come. You're going to have to get lucky, but the time will come. And then you will respond accordingly by leveraging your flexibility. You're just available at that moment. And then you will take advantage of the situation. That's all it comes down to.
I love what you guys said there. And I've always said same in maybe college football, basketball, recruiting, and writing, whatever you're doing. If you're doing something so good that people want it, you'll get found. Someone will find you doing that good work. If you're the best basketball player in a small town in Texas, you know what? Someone's going to find you. You're going to get an opportunity. You might go to a small school to start. Hey, and that's what we do at fightingchancefantasy.com. Our tagline is where fantasy's future is written. Before Dwain was writing at PFF and ETR, you know what? For a year, he published articles at fightingchancefantasy.com. You know what? Is it the biggest, greatest site in the world? Like, no, but it's where people cut their teeth. And, we've sent guys out to Fantasy Alarm, to Ball Blast, to, obviously PFF and ETR and Rotoballer and all these sites. It's great. So you got to start somewhere. If you're good, people will find you.
And
I love
one
it.
more, I would, like to Dwayne's point, the sentence I think he's trying to look for is wear many hats. Like just be available, do everything. And I could tell you, like I did that. I mean, if you scroll through the jobs I had for free too, I was a producer of Andy Benoit and Robert Klemko's and Robert May's podcast at the MMQB and did it for free. So much so that when they got bought out by Panoply, a podcast network, the CEO of Panoply called me and said, I'm looking for the producer. Everyone's sending me the John Daigle. I don't know who the hell John Daigle is. Like, who are you right now? And I had to explain to him, I was just a grinder looking for a way in. And he just told me,
actually, on Twitter, I'm not John Daigle.
I'm not JDaigle, actually, which is a whole nother story. But But yeah, and he was like, I appreciate your work, but understand there are legal complications here. Thus, you cannot do this anymore. So, I mean, literally, I was taking every opportunity under the sun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this all day. Let's get back into your tiers here. But see, those are the best shows when you're just talking about random. We're talking golf, we're talking wrestling, we're mixing in podcast stuff. We can have a whole show just about making it in the industry. Maybe when I release that article, Dwayne, we'll do that. We'll just BS for a while. But we're into tier 2, and it's Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, Cooper, and the like. Calvin Ridley's in this tier, so I have a feeling if Julio's traded, are you moving him up?
I should have in the rankings Calvin Ridley higher, yes. The issue is that I think the Cowboys offense will be better. We talked on previous shows, if people want to go back, about Ezekiel Elliott, how I think he's pretty much the best buy you can get among the top tier of running backs right now. And to save face and not deal with my mentions burning, I don't even have him really in the top tier. But I have him as my RB3, but I never mention it on social media because I don't want to deal with the communication effort of explaining why Zeke is the top 3 back because everyone else would hate it so much. But yeah, I'm all in on the Cowboys offense and that's why I have Amari Cooper as the wide receiver 8, just over Calvin Ridley. But I totally get it. That's why it's tiers. If you want to rate Calvin Ridley number 6 over Justin Jefferson and Metcalf, as I mentioned in the article, I just think Jefferson is a full-time player this year because remember, the Vikings were dumb enough to play him behind BC Johnson for the first 2 games. Those extra 2 games, not to mention a third one in a 17-game season, will matter. And that's why Adam Thielen out-targeted him 20-8 in end zone targets last season. But I would imagine that number regresses slightly in Jefferson's favor just by being a full-time player this year. And then, of course, Metcalf, like I mentioned, was the wide receiver 1, tanked with Seattle's offense over the second half of the season. Either way, those are just my rankings. You can move them along in that tier.
Yeah, I think if Julio moves on in the offense that I think Arthur Smith wants to install, and again we'll learn more about Arthur Smith this year, right? Is he one of these guys that kind of has a template and wants the players to fit it to some extent, and there's people that go in the middle, or is he just truly going to craft an offense to what he has? We don't really know the answer to that yet because we've only seen him in one stop. But based on what I've seen him in the press conference type stuff, it seems like they're going to try to incorporate quite a few things. They want to slow the game down some if they can. Again, the defense could be a problem. So honestly, like if Julio stays, it worries me. And I love Calvin Ridley, but it worries me, a little bit, right? Because if they do manage to pull off having a slower offense, and now you're divvying up these targets, across 2 guys pretty evenly, and they're not, and say they run, 100 less, 150 less plays, something like that, then that could potentially be an issue. But I think if Julio moves on, I'm treating Calvin Ridley, I'm moving him into my top tier, at that point. I think he would belong up there. He'd be similar to right in that A.J. Brown tier and a similar type of offense where really, Kyle Pitts is going to definitely, benefit from that as well. But I think Ridley becomes like the absolute clear alpha, right, of the offense in a very similar way to the way that we think about A.J. Brown.
John, I got to tell you, I love tier 3. I think for folks that go old school and they love that running back approach, you're going to have a lot of these guys on your roster. I don't want to give the whole thing away. I want you to go to NBCSportsEdge.com and read the article. But I was surprised to see Adam Thielen in there as a guy. We've touted Thielen for a long time on the show. Last year, 14 receiving touchdowns, only 7 for Justin Jefferson. A lot of guys out there, I tweeted this, probably wouldn't realize he doubled him up in receiving touchdowns. Do we think that Thielen, you have him at wide receiver 18, his ADP is wide receiver 20. Do we think this is kind of just where he is? Does he have that top 10 upside, or are we kind of saying he's been passed now by Jefferson and he's the 2 in that offense?
As I mentioned, he had a league high 20 end zone targets. So just naturally, you would think that number regresses, and he converted 13 and 20. Having said that, there is something to the analysis, especially when we're doing it in season, about teams like Devontae Adams. When they get inside the 10, they look for particular guys. And it was very clear. They would scheme targets to Thielen inside the 10. Yeah. And so maybe that doesn't go away, and that keeps Thielen high. And honestly, that I'm above the industry on Thielen. It seems like everyone's just factoring in his age and that's it, when really he's still very good. As I mentioned, though, 13 full games with Justin Jefferson and still just to slightly out-target him 103-90. That tells me that Jefferson will be closer in that mix and thus will probably soak touchdowns away from Thielen. So while I'm still higher on him, I could understand if someone wants to move him lower. This tier is interesting because I still every day wake up and consider moving Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp higher. I want to be higher on the Rams offense.
Yes.
And to do so, I need to move Robert Woods higher than like wide receiver 15. And the range of outcomes for Kupp is outscoring Woods. So I need to be higher on him as well. The issue is that, as you can see in these tiers 2 and 3, wide receiver is stacked this year. It is so hard to parse these guys rankings wise, even tiers wise, obviously. And so those are sort of the battles I look at whenever I see this.
So many good players.
It's a tough tier to parse. I agree. Like I've been going through it and because I've got them all stacked out and it's like, man, like where to draw the line on these guys is really hard. And the drop off, right, between some of these early tiers, it's not, it's not huge, right? There's certain reasons that you're drawing the line there. But I like what you're saying, about you want to give people an edge. And so sometimes, given the Stafford upside, right, in the equation for the Rams, we really don't know what the Rams look like in a quarterback that doesn't have to be totally schemed up, right? Like Goff. So now you're going to have a scheme that's going to help Stafford probably more than ever, but he's also going to be able to do a lot of things that Goff wasn't. So it is going to be very interesting to see, how that offense can click. The one thing I'll say about Thielen, and Jefferson, right? It's similar to when you think about, the Titans. It's similar to whenever you think about some of these other teams that they want to be a run first team and they'd like to play defense. Now, Minnesota's got defensive problems right now, but you do have a defensive-minded head coach and Zimmer. So that always is kind of a damp blanket for me, because that if things worked out for the defense and they have a chance to where they don't have to throw the ball, Cleveland falls into this same kind of bucket. Like they'll let their foot off the gas in the passing game. We saw that multiple times last year. The thing I like about Thielen that I think people forget about is in the scheme, which is Kubiak's, scheme, and now his son's going to run it. It's just Adam Thielen gets a lot of really good matchups. So 34% of his targets came against a linebacker or a safety. 32% of his targets came on play action. Daigle, you already talked about how much he gets leveraged right in the end zone. I do think, to your point, that should come down a little bit, and Jefferson probably goes up, a little bit. But even if he is getting a little bit older, I don't consider him to be, too old to be productive. He's in a really good scheme that creates a lot of really good looks, for a player that can do things really well like he does. And there's just the rapport with him and Cousins. Like, you just can't ignore it. Like, it's there. Those two guys, they are very much on the same page. And I'm big on chemistry, right, between, guys that have proven it in the past. And so I have no problem with I love this. I love how you have this tier set up. Yeah. And I think Thielen, as a guy that I'm very happy to draft, in this range.
And Cousins, by the way, was awesome last year for fantasy. He averaged over 8 yards per attempt from week 5 on. And like you said, the cronyism from Gary to his son, it doesn't change the offense whatsoever. Yep. So, why would not be back all in on the Vikings offense? That's why I love Thielen is just such a much cheaper double stack, because no one drafts Cousins, no one drafts Thielen, but you can get Dalvin Cook at the number 2 spot. So anytime I end up with a Cook, I do actually double stack him every single time.
I like that. How about Jamar Chase and Odell Beckham here in this same tier together? You got a guy who just a few short years ago was going in the top 5 of many redraft in Odell Beckham. And we've got Jamar Chase, who hasn't played in a year, coming into the league in Cincinnati. And, we're going to get Joe Burrow back. And I know you've got some great stats about how high paced the offense was under Burrow. So we've got this kind of young pup and the old grizzled vet who, I don't know, can we say, has Beckham been a disappointment? I mean, his career kind of has just fallen off the last few years. Dwain, I know you're very high on him and what he could do this year, but boy, there's such a dynamic here with these two in the tier. And you're going to have this opportunity in a draft. You're going to be sitting there on the board, maybe whatever, 5th, 6th round. You're going to go, do I want Jamar Chase or do I want Odell Beckham? So which way are you going to lean, people? We'll start with John.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were starting with Dwayne. It comes down to the offense for me, and that's why I'm buying into Jamar Chase. Odell Beckham, I'm listening, and Again, him, Brandon Ayuk too, I thought I would be higher on. But then you start listing out the receivers. That's the issue when I see people on Twitter talking about like this receiver, everyone needs to get higher on him. I don't care who we should be higher on. I care about who you're taking out because it's impossible. It's literally impossible. I try to squeeze DJ Moore in higher, and I'm higher than everyone in the industry on Moore, but I can't get him any higher because everyone's so good among the top 30 receivers. Odell Beckham, as I mentioned, led in every single category quietly because the production wasn't there. But the opportunity we chase, whether it's air yard targets, end zone targets, the list goes on. That's why you would chase Odell Beckham again, who's still a top 5 receiver, just reality-wise in the league. So, of course, I'd be fine drafting Odell Beckham. But Jamar Chase, it sets up too well. You mentioned, I've talked about probably already in the show, I believe, during the draft, Cincinnati's up-tempo offense. But I'll say it again here. Just the fact in Burrow's 2 games, they led in passes per game and dropbacks per game. But then also, as Pat Thorman notes in his most recent article on Establish the Run, also first in plays per game with Burrow under center and the fastest offense in neutral game script with Burrow. And so everything lends itself to a pass-happy offense now with a teammate who's already worked with Burrow and just fits schematically because they don't have an alpha. That's not Tyler Boyd or T. Higgins. T. Higgins is more like Michael Gallup, who's a tremendous receiver, but he does one thing really well, and that's fine for fantasy, but he's never going to dominate in target share. Whereas Jamar Chase arrives and will do that from week 1. So that's why I'm higher. I just think the offense is more friendlier.
Mr. McFarland, your rebuttal.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like a little bit of a cheaper version, right, of what you could. And I know this hasn't worked out well, right, for Zach Taylor. It's kind of like that cheaper version of what you could be getting, with the Ram stack. I will say, Jamar Chase, I've been a bit hesitant to pull the trigger on him, where he's going. When you layer it all in and you look at all the other players around him, it's closer, right, than what I thought it was going to be. But I think we're being, we're being optimistic, right? I think a lot of this as well. Justin Jefferson had 1,400 yards last year, et cetera, et cetera. But I totally get it. I think Jamar Chase's range of outcomes, I totally think he could have, 1,000, 1,100 yard season, catch 6-7 touchdowns, on 70 balls. I think this is going to be a very evenly distributed offense, and that's really how the Rams have done it, more often than not as well, whenever they've ran the 3 wide receiver sets, right, back in the day with Brandon Cooks or Sammy Watkins before that, and then you had Kupp, obviously, and Robert Woods. So I think you'll see something a little bit similar. That they've got a blank at tight end with Sample. So I think it's just going to be those 3 guys all day long. Maybe Auden Tate sneaks out there, a little bit. But I do worry that, I don't think T. Higgins, right, is a sieve. So I think there's a greater than, 0% chance that T. Higgins could actually be the guy to lead the team, right, and yards and targets, just given what he did as a rookie on a team that just, wasn't very good. And he and Burrow really did seem to establish that connection. So I'm very excited about what the future could bring for these, though. But it is a best ball stack that I've done a couple times because it is affordable. And there is the upside because everything you just talked about with Thorman, I was just looking at all the same things, their neutral pass play numbers, the speed and the tempo of the offense, those things are all really good. I know Burrow, there was a recent quote, here a couple of days ago, it's got folks a little scared, right? That, where's he going to be to start the season? But I'm leaning towards the optimistic side, as far as, given how much time he's had to recover and that he is a quarterback. He may not be quite as mobile, but I think he should be fine, in the passing game. So I'm not going to take – whenever I'm getting Chase is when he slides a little bit past this.
So I actually totally agree with you. I don't have much Chase because he is going quite higher than my ranking actually. And so I've just been taking, since I believe in this offense for all the reasons I mentioned, I've just been taking Boyd and Higgins in double stacks as the cheaper plays because they still have extremely high floors. And just in Higgins being like a Gallup-like player, it may be apples to oranges here, but like Gallup, even with that high A dot as the team's deep threat, did spike 1 wide receiver, 1 finish, so a top 12 finish in his 4 games with Dak Prescott. And everyone overlooks those guys because they are worried about the consequences of volatile output. But I'm fine with the risk in those guys because volatility includes winning your week with deep shots on those guys. So that's how I treat Higgins. And again, he's going Boyd too, so much cheaper than Jamar Chase.
Yeah, and if you're following a lot of the roster construction, optimization, advice stuff out there, I mean, typically you're drafting 8 to 9 receivers, right?
Yes.
So when you do that, and just to what you just said, even though you may have these guys that are spread out and in redraft, you may be thinking, well, they're all just going to kind of cannibalize each other. They're going to be good, but none of them are going to be great. To your point, it doesn't work out where they're all even every week. It's just that it kind of rotates, between them, throughout the week. So if you've got a situation set up where you've got, 2 of them, and then you've got 6 other receivers or 7 other receivers on your squad, and you're just trying to get enough of them to pop each week, that's really where the fragile running back thing came from, was because people were able to succeed, because of what they were able to do with the receivers by having 8 to 9 on their best ball rosters.
Mm-hmm. John, we've kept you here so long. It's turning into an episode of Something to Wrestle, and I am certainly no Conrad Thompson. So before we get you out of here, this is a 7-tier article that you have here. Give me a deep sleeper, someone you really like from these late tiers, and why is it Devonta Smith?
I actually don't know if it's Devonta Smith. I'm quickly scanning the names, but I also know who I've been drafting late. I've been drafting Byron Pringle late, since he was used in the postseason over Mecole Hardman. And that doesn't mean I'm out on Mecole Hardman. I'll still take him wherever it counts, because there is some recency bias going into his ADP. But Byron Pringle's in the last round every single format, no matter what. And the GM, just like Mecole Hardman, has talked him up as well. So I'll always draft Byron Pringle. Amari Rodgers, the opportunity's there. The team also doesn't have any wide receiver, Robert Tonyan included, under contract through after 2021, behind Devontae Adams. And so I would think they start working in Amari Rodgers. There's really no threat in the slot for him, and that's what he was in college. So I draft him a lot as well. I would say the one guy I'm overweight on that we need to get higher on is Nelson Aguilar, because I understand the rapport with Derek Carr probably factors in. He was very good with one specific quarterback. But to just lead the team in air yards and end zone targets and genuinely be an awesome receiver last year. Like, maybe the ceiling could have been higher if they used Henry Ruggs like that. But the fact is they have no idea how to use Henry Ruggs. So thus it was Nelson Aguilar. Going to the Patriots also for that amount of free agent money tells me that he's going to be the every down receiver. Kendrick Bourne's going to be in on third down and the red zone, but Aguilar is still going to be their number one threat. And that's why I just think with Mac Jones, who's a better passer than Cam Newton at this stage of his career, I have been drafting a lot of him.
Yeah, we were talking up Aguilar. I was taking him in some drafts. I mean, he's a great blocker. He can play any position of wide receiver. You can put him at the X, the Y, or the Z. And he can be on the field for all 3 downs. Anything else, Dwain, you want to get out before we wrap it up tonight?
Yeah. I mean, I love the Aguilar thing. What was really interesting about that, though, is insane. I was digging into that because I was doing some research on the Raiders and Derek Carr, because he's never really been a good deep ball passer, right? And last year he was actually graded out as one of the best in the league, and a big part of that was Aguilar. But if you look at their, deep ball passing rate, the percentage, right, of times that their deep throws were open or wide open, right? So that means 2 steps or more on your defender to be open, or to be wide open is basically a busted coverage. Usually only teams, if you look at their stats, they'll have maybe 8 or 9 of those, but open, is like 15 to 20%, of your, maybe 30% of your plays. But whenever you're looking
at the Jets throwing a 0 blitz at somebody in a game, they have to
but when you look at the deep shots, the EPA per play last year on those for the Raiders, was 1.5, and they actually had the highest percentage, right, of plays where, the receiver actually had 2 steps of separation or more on deep ball throws. I mean, and so kind of where I'm going with that, that says a lot about Aguilar. I mean, because he was really the guy that was being used that way. So we've got to have somebody from the Patriots that can take advantage. But I'm with Daigle. That's he's probably in my top 2 or 3 as far as ownership right now in my best ball drafts. The guy I would throw out there that I'm still loving, and I think he gets a quarterback upgrade this year, and it's DJ Chark, because he can be the vertical element. He can work intermediate. We've seen him work underneath. So he can work all levels of the field. And I think that's, as much as I love Laviska Shenault, I don't think of Shenault that way, right? Shenault really is more of an underneath, intermediate, line him up in the backfield sometimes, which who knows now with Etienne on the team. I'm worried about that for Chenault. But I think DJ Chark is the one guy on the team that can truly be the alpha. And we've seen him do that, right? He broke out and did that in his second year after having a horrible rookie year. And then you saw last year that really just calmed down. But there were stretches last year, where it was getting really close. And so I think Chark's one of these guys for me this year. I'm just going to own, quite a bit. I mean, if you look at it last year, week 6, 7, and 9, air yards, 201, 117, 170. And then again later in the season, 131, 144, 129. He had 1,347 air yards. He battled a few injuries here and there. But what was good is he really played through them, where in the past he had struggled with some of that. So I think Chark is the guy, for me, when I look at this, that I think I'm probably going to own more than any other receiver, this year, because he's just sliding a bit too much. And I know that he has that elite upside and he gets an upgrade in quarterback. So I like him, especially where I'm getting him. A lot of times he's my wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, typically, right? When I'm drafting him, just depending on how I'm handling my roster construction. So DJ Chark is just the guy for me, so far. And I'm still doing, some additional research, but so far across the guys that I've really dug into, like he's the one that stood out to me. And
maybe they do use him like the regime did last year as a deep target. Him, Jerry Jeudy, Michael Gallup from week 5 on, Marquise Brown until Lamar Jackson returned from the COVID list. Like those were guys getting true prayer yards, just the deep targets that didn't matter. Everyone kept citing their air yards, but it doesn't matter when the air yards fly 20 yards over your head. And that was the case with those receivers. So just to have upgraded quarterback play, perhaps those deep yards actually come to fruition this year.
Yeah, that's the key.
Darnell Mooney as well. That's the prayer yards Hall of Fame, by the way. There's like 7 busts in there from 2020. DJ Chark's the Hall of Famer in the very back, even though Jerry Jeudy was very close with Drew Lock, who, by the way, the Broncos have the league's the easiest projected passing schedule. If you factor in all like the free agency additions and EPA and Football Outsiders DVOA metrics, which tells me that as long as they put Bridgewater under center, not Lock, all he needs to do is get the ball in their hands, and the guys will make plays against that soft schedule. Whereas, Lock, we've seen, can't get the ball in guys' hands.
I'll throw one interesting thing, last topic kind of think out there. Drake, you may have one more thing, but I know we got to go, Daigle. We really appreciate you, man.
I'll just keep drinking and talking.
The fern behind Daigle is going to die soon.
So here's one I was thinking about, and I will admit it was in the vein of, all the folks trying to figure out who is the Josh Allen so-and-so, combo, Diggs Twitter, debate this weekend that people were just throwing everybody out like, oh, it's Baker and it's OBJ, it's this and this. And like when I look at it, like, and I kind of think about like all the elements that are in play, right, that we talked about earlier. Number one, you had a quarterback that turned their accuracy around. Number 2, you had a team that ran the ball a ton that all of a sudden just decided we're going to unleash it and we're going to throw it. And then you had, a weapon on the team, right, and Diggs that could be a true alpha. And I don't know.
Can I guess?
That's the missing ingredient here. Are you going to take a guess?
Yeah. Can I guess?
Guess.
Is it Ryan Fitzpatrick, Terry McLaurin?
No, but I like that one.
That's mine.
I do like that one. But this one is a real stretch because it would take like this total flipping the offense on its head. But when I look at this particular offense and I look where they've invested and the types of things they've let go, it's the Ravens. They've invested a ton into receivers, right? Over the last 3 drafts. They're obviously trying to hit on these things. Now, they're big believers in rotating players on and off the field, right? There's nobody outside the quarterback and the offensive lineman that plays 90% of the snaps hardly ever, right? A few games Marquise Brown was able to hit that number. But if Lamar Jackson could take steps, right, in his accuracy, and you already nailed it earlier, it's outside and down the field. That's where Jackson really, really struggles. And teams know this now, right? So they're starting to try to take away, the middle of the field. And if you go look at like, the PFF, quarterback annual that comes out every year, you'll notice where the targets in the middle of the field basically had to move for Lamar Jackson. They had to start adjusting things because of the way that the teams were playing it. And you can even see it when you're watching the games. But when I look at it, you have a field stretcher, right? And Marquise Brown. Now you bring in Rashad Bateman, who can be more of your possession, but he can also hit some big plays as well. You got guys like Duvernay that can play in the slot. I won't even mention Sammy Watkins, but yes, they added him. And you don't have like 3 tight ends on the roster, right, that you want to play all the time anymore. And so it makes me wonder, like, are the Ravens eventually, could they move more to this offense where obviously Lamar is still a heavy running threat, but it's much more out of 11 personnel, right, instead of 12 and out of 21. And does that potentially give the other teams in their conference that have really built their teams now to try to stop what the Ravens are doing by, through their running game? Does that potentially flip the whole thing, right, and give them this new advantage, right, because now they're spreading you out and doing these different things. And again, I have nothing to like back this up at all, but like that would be the one that like would come out that everybody would be like, oh my God, Lamar Jackson threw for 4,500 yards. Marquise Brown went off for 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns, and we never saw it coming. But it would require a similar scenario to last year where his accuracy would have to improve and the offense would have to totally flip the script. But the one thing that makes me slightly think about it is all the draft capital they've put in receivers and some of the people they've let go at tight end over the last 2 to 3 years.
And by the way, I don't know if you've seen their schedule, but the Ravens, like in the first 5 weeks, play the Raiders, Chiefs, Lions, Broncos, and Colts. So Lamar's going to get first quarter season MVP talk for sure.
Yeah.
I've been coming around to the idea that the additions of Rashad Bateman and Sammy Watkins actually improve Marquise Brown's outlook.
Yes.
They do take away from the middle of the field. They are strictly boundary field stretchers. It's what they do. So yes, I've slightly grown higher on Marquise Brown.
He's underpriced, man. I will say if I hadn't have picked Chark, because I don't quite feel as strong about Brown. Like Chark, I really feel strongly about. But Brown is a guy that's definitely underpriced. People, they've gone too far. Now, last year he was way overpriced, so I didn't get to own him much. But that's the cool thing in fantasy you'll notice. When people get overexcited one year because of FOMO, right? Yeah. They don't want to miss out on a player. If it doesn't hit for them, they way overreact the next year. Like Marquise Brown shouldn't have fallen as much as he's fallen in drafts right now. And he's an easy stack to make in best ball because basically you can take Lamar Jackson, turn it with Andrews, and then come back and get Marquise Brown later. And then Bateman, is basically free.
And add Van Jefferson to that mix in the last round because they play the Ravens in week 17.
Oh, yeah. So it's Rams and Ravens and week 17.
It is Rams and Ravens. Yeah, I actually have like week 17 as much memorized as week 1 because I've just been adding all the guys to my stacks. Cowboys and Cardinals too, by the way.
I love it. If I was to throw a rando stack out there, like Dwayne said, I would go with the Dolphins. I love what they added at wide receiver there. If you look at Waddle, you look at Fuller,
yes,
Devonta Parker, with Tua, love it.
I like that one a lot, Drake. Hey, Drake, this weekend I did finally pull off the Eagles stack. Devonta Smith usually goes too early. Mm-hmm. So, Daigle, it's kind of one of those things that we were talking about earlier, like with Pitts. It's like, well, crap, he fell to this spot. I never get to own him. I'm going to draft him. So it happened with Devonta Smith this weekend. He fell, like 8 or 9 picks because he's been creeping up. He's just too high for me. Mm-hmm. And he's still too high where I took him, but I immediately turned around and took Hurts the next round. I was picking in the 11-hole and 12-person draft. I saw the guy behind me already had a quarterback, so I took Devonta Smith. Hurts came back to me. And then Jalen Reagor is my most owned receiver right now. So, I think that's another guy that people just are they've just written him off. It's like, okay, you can get Jalen Reagor rounds 12 through 14. He's basically free. He's still a first-round pick. He's getting to move into the slot. There's a lot of things I like about Jalen Reagor.
I was high on him as the guy Jalen Hurts targeted before we found the news that he was going to be moving to the slot. And it's like, oh, now he has a higher floor, too. This is great.
Yep.
Mm. All right, if we keep doing this show, Dwayne will be completely off the screen at some point. He's moving over.
That's what happens when you're talking with friends. You just get 2 casual sometimes, start moving around, and yeah.
And the other problem is these Yeti koozies make you feel like you have much more beer in your can than you do because they're so heavy. But
I was actually about to mute myself and run off screen and grab a drink if we kept going. I'm not kidding.
So
that's when we know we've taken too much of your time, Daigle, if you got to run off screen and get another drink.
Yes, seriously. So everyone, thanks so much for hanging out with us. Thanks for everybody in the chat room. If you're on YouTube, go to Fantasy Football Hustle, hit that subscribe button, and leave us a good comment over there on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get this lovely podcast. If you go over to pff.com, use our promo code HUSTLE, save 25% off any subscription package. John Daigle, thanks so much for your time, man. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. I always love chatting with you.
For Dwain McFarland, I am Brian Drake. We'll see you soon, folks. And remember, never get out hustled. Take it easy.